My name is James and I never expected a business conference in Chicago to completely change my life as a 24-year-old marketing executive. I was used to these corporate events, the endless presentations, networking, sessions and socializing. What I wasn't prepared for was running into Elijah, my best friend from college who I hadn't seen in 2 years. Elijah and I had been inseparable during university, the kind of friends who could talk for hours about everything and nothing. He was the stereotypical college athlete playing soccer and breaking hearts while I focused on my business degree and quietly came to terms with my sexuality. I never told him I was gay, not because I thought he'd react badly, but because I couldn't bear the thought of making things awkward between us. After graduation, we drifted apart as careers took us to different cities. He went into sports management in Seattle while I landed a job in New York. We kept in touch through occasional texts and social media, but it wasn't the same. So when I literally bumped into him in the hotel lobby during the conference's first coffee break, it felt like fate. He looked exactly the same. Tall, athletic build with that easy smile that made everyone feel special. James. His face lit up with recognition. No way. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, he pulled me into a bear hug and I was instantly transported back to our college days. He smelled the same, a mix of cologne and something uniquely him that I tried so hard to forget. We spent the rest of the coffee break catching up. Elijah was there, representing his sports management firm, looking to make connections with potential sponsors. He'd recently ended a long-term relationship with his girlfriend Sarah and had thrown himself into work as a distraction. Are you staying at this hotel? He asked as we noted not people heading back to the conference rooms. I nodded. 10th floor. No way, I'm on 10 too. We should grab dinner later, really catch up properly. That evening after the day sessions ended, we met in the hotel restaurant. One dinner turned into drinks at the hotel bar and suddenly it was like no time had passed at all. We fell back into our old pattern of easy conversation and shared jokes. Remember that time in sophomore year when you talked me out of quitting the team? Elijah asked, nursing his third beer. You always knew exactly what to say to keep me going. I remembered everything about our college days, including all the feelings I'd tried to suppress. How about you? He asked. Anyone special in your life? I shook my head. Work keeps me busy. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it was the truth. Either as the bar started to empty, Elijah suggested we continue talking in his room. I've got a bottle of whiskey from the duty free, he said, just like old times. My heart raced at the suggestion, but I kept my voice casual. Sure, why not? His room was larger than mine, with a sitting area and a view of the city lights. We sat on the couch and he poured us each a drink. The whiskey was smooth, warming me from the inside as we continued talking. As the night progressed and the whiskey level in the bottle decreased, our conversation grew more personal. Elijah talked about his breakup with Sarah, revealing vulnerabilities I'd rarely seen in him before. She said I was emotionally unavailable, he said, running a hand through his hair, that I never let her in completely. Maybe she was right. You've always been guarded with relationships, I observed, trying to maintain my composure despite how close we were sitting. He turned to look at me, his eyes slightly unfocused from the alcohol. Not with you though, you're the only one I've ever felt completely comfortable with. The air in the room suddenly felt thicker. I took another sip of whiskey to steady my nerves. That's different. We're friends, are we? His voice was quiet. Sometimes I wonder if that's all it is. My heart stopped. What do you mean? He shifted closer and I could smell the whiskey on his breath mixed with his familiar scent. I don't know, sometimes back in college I'd catch you looking at me a certain way, and sometimes I'd find myself looking back. Elijah, I started, not sure what I was going to say. I've never told anyone this, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, but there were nights when I'd lie awake thinking about you, about us, about what it might be like if he trailed off. But his hand had found its way to my knee. The touch sent electricity through my body. If what I managed to ask, though my throat felt dry. Instead of answering, he leaned forward, closing the distance between us. His lips brushed against mine Tentatively at first then with more certainty when I didn't pull away. The kiss deepened years of unspoken feelings pouring out when we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily. Elijah rested his forehead against mine. Wanted to do that for so long, he whispered. Even back in college, I didn't understand what I was feeling. Then my mind was spinning, partly from the whiskey but mostly from what was happening. Are you sure about this? You're not just drunk. He pulled back slightly to look at me, his eyes clear despite the alcohol. I'm tipsy, but I know exactly what I'm doing, what I want. His hand cup my face. I've been running from this for years, James, from these feelings, from who I really am. Why now? I asked, needing to understand, because seeing you today, it brought everything back, all those feelings I tried to ignore, tried to bury. With relationships with women. He took a shaky breath when Sarah said I was emotionally unavailable. It was because I was comparing everyone to you. No one else ever made me feel the way you do. I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear mixed with desire. This was Elijah, stripped of all his usual confidence, showing me a side of himself he'd kept hidden from everyone, maybe even from himself. I never told you I was gay, I said softly. I was so afraid of losing you. I think part of me knew, he replied, running his thumb along my jawline. Maybe that's why I kept my own feelings buried. It was easier to pretend we were just friends than to face what it might mean. We talked for hours, sharing secrets and feelings we'd both kept hidden for years. Elijah told me about the times he'd caught himself staring at me during soccer practice, about the jealousy he'd felt when I dated other guys in college, though I tried to keep it discreet, about how he tried to convince himself his feelings were just strong friendship. As the night deepened, our conversation became interspersed with gentle touches and soft kisses. Each contact felt like making up for lost time, healing old wounds we both carried. I used to dream about this, Elijah admitted, his fingers intertwined with mine, but I'd wake up feeling confused and guilty. I wasn't ready to accept what it meant, and now I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Now he smiled softly. Now I'm terrified and excited and more alive than I've felt in years. Being with you feels right, James. It feels like coming home. We moved to sit on the edge of his bed, the city lights twinkling through the window, creating an intimate atmosphere. Elijah told me about his struggles with his identity, how he tried to fit into the straight athlete stereotype, dating women because it was expected of him. Soccer was my excuse, he said. I told myself I couldn't be gay because I was an athlete, because it didn't fit the image. But watching you in college, seeing how comfortable you were with yourself, even if you weren't out to everyone, it made me question everything. Why didn't you ever say anything? He laughed softly. Why didn't you? We were both so afraid of losing each other that we never took the chance to have something more. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, how we spent years dancing around our feelings, both wanting more but too scared to reach for it. Now in this hotel room miles from home, all those barriers were finally coming down. What happens after tonight? I asked, the question that had been nagging at me. We live in different cities. You're still not out. This could complicate everything. Elijah turned to face me fully. I don't know exactly, but I know I don't want to go back to pretending. These feelings for you, they're not going away. They never did. We spent the rest of the night talking about possibilities. Elijah's company had an office in New York, and he'd been offered a position there months ago but had turned it down. Now he was reconsidering. I could transfer, he said, his voice full of cautious hope. We could see where this goes. Take it slow. The idea of having him in New York, of being able to explore this newfound relationship properly, made my heart race. Are you sure that's a huge decision to make in one night? He smiled, touching my face gently. I've wasted years not making this decision. Besides, the New York position is actually promotion. I was just too comfortable in Seattle, too afraid of change. As dawn began to creep through the window, we lay on the bed, fully clothed, just holding each other. Elijah traced patterns on my arm with his fingers, lost in thought. My sister came out last year, he said suddenly. My parents were incredibly supportive. I remember feeling so relieved for her, but also angry at myself for not having the same courage. I turned to face him. Coming out is different for everyone. There's no timeline you have to follow, I know, but being here with you feeling this way, I don't want to hide anymore. He propped himself up on an elbow. I want to do this right, start fresh, be honest about who I am, who we are. The morning light was painting the room in soft colors when we finally fell asleep, still holding each other. When we woke a few hours later, I half expected Elijah to have regrets, to blame everything on the whiskey instead. Instead, he pulled me closer and kissed me. Good morning. Still sure about this? I asked. More sure than I've ever been about anything, he replied. The rest of the conference passed in a blur of stolen moments between sessions. We'd attend our respective meetings during the day, then spend evenings together in one of our rooms, making up for lost time with conversations and tender moments. On our last night in Chicago, Elijah took me to dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. He'd already called his company's HR department about the transfer to New York, and they were enthusiastic about having him lead their East Coast sports division. I told them I needed to make the move for personal reasons, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. It was a small gesture, but in public it felt monumental. I'm done hiding James. Over the next few months, our lives transformed. Elijah moved to New York, finding an apartment just a few blocks from mine. He came out to his family gradually, first his sister, who cried happy tears and hugged him for 5 straight minutes, then his parents, who proved to be just as supportive as they'd been with his sister. Coming out in the sports management world was trickier, but Elijah approached it with the same determination he'd shown on the soccer field. He didn't make any grand announcements, he simply stopped hiding. When colleagues asked about his move to New York, he told them he'd moved to be with me. Most were supportive, and those who weren't quickly learned that Elijah's sexuality had no bearing on his professional capabilities. Our relationship deepened as we navigated this new chapter together. We had our challenges. Elijah sometimes struggled with internalized homophobia, and I had to learn to be patient as he became comfortable with public displays of affection, but every step forward felt like a victory. We shared one evening about 6 months after that night in Chicago. We returned to the same hotel for another conference. We booked the same room where everything had started, ordering whiskey from room service more for symbolism than desire to drink it. Remember how scared we were that first night? Elijah asked, holding me close as we looked out at the city lights. Terrified, I agreed. I thought I was going to lose my best friend. Instead, you gained a partner. He kissed my temple. I wish I could go back and tell RL that it would all work out. Would you change anything? Tell me sooner. He thought for a moment. No, I needed that time to understand myself, to become someone worthy of you, but I wouldn't change where we ended up. Looking back now, that night in the hotel room was both an ending and a beginning. It was the end of pretending, of hiding, of denying who we were and what we meant to each other, but it was also the beginning of something beautiful, a love story that had been years in the making. Elijah and I still face challenges the sports world isn't always accepting, and we occasionally encounter prejudice, but we face everything together, now stronger for having finally embraced our truth. Sometimes late at night we'll talk about those years we spent as just friends and marvel at how blind we were to what was right in front of us. But maybe that's how the best love stories work. They don't always announce themselves with fireworks and drama. I see declarations. Sometimes they build slowly over years of friendship and shared moments, until one night in a hotel room, with the help of some liquid courage and years of pent-up feelings, everything finally falls into place. And when people ask us how we got together, we just smile and say it took us a while to find our way to each other, because sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be.